I'd like to call our City Council meeting to order. We have all of our City Council members present this evening. We will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance led by Leland Hawks, who is a member of our Chamber of Commerce.
Will the audience please rise? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Leland. We have two presentations scheduled for this evening. However, one will be rescheduled for August 8th. That's a presentation regarding the city's Community Preservation Department and the city's Administrative Civil Code Enforcement Program. So we're going to move that to the 8th. But we do have an update from the Salt Lake County Housing Authority regarding moderate housing located in the city of West Jordan. And we have Zach Bales here to do that for us this evening. So Zach, come up, please.
Great, thank you for having me. I'll be brief, but open to questions as well of what I share. Thank you, Mayor, and to the council. So we're here to give an update about a transaction we're hoping to do here in the near future that relates to our public housing. But to give a brief kind of overview of the services we offer rental assistance in a number of different manners that probably many of you are familiar with. Section 8 vouchers that individuals can use out in the community and find housing that they select. Tax credit properties, I'm imagining in your jurisdiction you have a number of multifamily affordable complexes. And the third that I'll talk briefly about tonight is public housing, which is a form of federal rental subsidy that's in the form of fixed units that we operate ourselves as a housing authority. So there's a number of units within West Jordan that we're hoping to dispose of. There's a unique opportunity through HUD that would allow us to move a number of units out from under HUD under our own control. And just to give a little background on why that's the case, a number of housing authorities across the country have managed portfolios that are scattered sites. So they're either single-family homes, duplexes, fourplexes, and the way our funding comes to us is each year the federal government establishes how much money we need to operate and maintain that housing, and typically it gets a haircut. So we usually get anywhere from about 70 to maybe approaching 80 cents on the dollar to maintain that housing. And what you could imagine is with that, maintaining the property and under the structure of public housing, it's been quite difficult. If you think of across the portfolio of our current units, driving around all of the valley for our grouping of these properties, it takes about 3 days. So for that reason, we're seeking to dispose of a couple of the properties. So within West Jordan, it is 8 single-family homes and 4 duplexes, so a total of 16 units. So kind of questions on, or some answers to the tenant side of it and the unit side of it. So on the unit side, we would be moving those units out from under public housing. So that would allow us to either sell the units, we could either sell them to ourselves. Our intent, hopefully, would be to sell them to the individuals living in those homes to hopefully maintain the affordability. So that would be the first intent of our process. From there, I think we would look to anyone that's on our family self-sufficiency program, which are particular households that are working on improving their income and really becoming self-sufficient. And then the third would be opening them up to kind of a broader base of individuals that need affordable housing, and this would be a great opportunity for them to own their own home. So that's what would happen there. On the tenant side, we had some communication around just the information remaining important to not share around the locations. One of the steps that we'll go through is informing the tenants of these households of this process and their rights. And none of the individuals living in the current public housing would be left without assistance, whether it's remaining in place or receiving rental assistance. So none of the families will be affected by the real estate transaction. So Any questions?
Councilmember Whitelock.
So what's the advantage of having it under just you instead of having, I know in Utah we have an aversion to the federal government. I get that. But aside from that, what is the benefit?
Yeah, so most of the public housing that's remained sustainable across the country are more dense properties. And most of the scattered sites, so single-family home duplexes, have been disposed of. Many other housing authorities have already done that. And it's really just a function of dollars. So we receive anywhere from 70 to 80 cents on the dollar to maintain it. And so under the current structure, likely what would happen if we play it out 10 years, 15 years, is we really would run short of the money necessary to maintain those properties well. To support the affordability. And I think what we intend to do is really, with this opportunity made available, is get in front of that to hopefully ensure that those homes can remain affordable, but move them to home ownership so that individuals who purchase them can own and maintain them.
I like that idea. Thank you.
Well, I see no more questions from our council members, so thank you very much for that presentation.
Great. Thank you so much.
We'll now move to our communications. Start with our city manager. Any report from you tonight?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. We're going to try something to move things along faster. After you ask me if I have any comments, I'll have consulted with the staff so you don't have to necessarily work your way around the horseshoe in the future. As such, I can tell you I have nothing to add, but I do know that Public Works and the Police Department do have something to add. And given that this is the first time we're trying this, if I missed and I did not understand the staff from my previous question, does anybody need to add anything besides those two? That being the case, I'll turn time over to the Public Works Director.
Thank you. This is very well appreciated.
Thanks, Mayor. Just an update on the Public Works building. The plan is to finally move in on August 30th. Justin and Patrick have been working diligently with the contractor to make that happen. Once moved in, it'll probably be a couple weeks worth of small items that the contractor's gonna have to come back and touch up on and different things. So we're looking at having an open house towards the end of August, once everybody's moved in and settled in. So I just wanted to give you guys an update. So hopefully Monday we'll be moving furniture in and staff.
So along with that, I guess a question regarding that, back to our city manager, would you want to schedule a dedication of the building at about that same time? Okay, so I just...
I'm being told my mic's off. If it's helpful for you to have all done in one visit, I don't think that would be a bad idea to try to consolidate all the activities of groundbreaking, a visit. How long do you think the council would like to see? That building is large, and I went through it quickly, and it took 40 minutes.
Well, I just think that having the open house and dedication the same day, same time, I think would be appropriate.
So if we commit a time block of 2 hours for the presentation, enough time for people to walk around and see it, I think that would be ample time. Does anyone disagree that 2 hours is enough, too much or too little?
Provide roller skates?
Segways.
Segways would be good.
I need to restate, I think I said August 30th. It's July 30th we're moving in. So this upcoming Monday, sorry.
Okay, so when would you want to be looking at the open house? Because if you were thinking before August 30th and now it's July 30th.
Well, we'll have the open house towards the end of August. I'm thinking, yeah, give us 3 weeks to get everything taken care of, and then we can do a dedication. And
okay, we can work together on a date.
okay,
Thank you.
that's all I got. Thank you.
The other item was from the Chief of Police.
Hey, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. You've all should have gotten an invitation for a National Night Out on August 7th at 6 o'clock. We want to invite you all to come out and spend some time with our officers and go out and spend some time with the community as well. We've had some pretty good turnout so far. We've had several people reach out to us, and should be a pretty busy year with the National Night Out this year. So if you could just RSVP us so that we know you're coming with us, or if you're going to go by yourself, that'd be great as well. If you could just let us know. So thank you.
Thank you. I will now move to council reports. So start with Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Don't really have anything to report other than I am looking forward to Night Out Against Crime on August 7th. So thank you, that's all I have.
Councilmember Jacob.
If I didn't have anything, I'd want to say nothing tonight because we're going to miss that, but I have something. I wanted to say thank you to the fire department for last night and obviously for the whole month of July, right? It's been a hot and dry one, and with extra tinder out there and extra fire sparking sources that we don't have every other month of the year. I just want to say thank you for a job well done. There was a grass fire a couple hundred yards from my house last night, and they got to it and got it put out before it got too bad, although it was impressive looking from my son's bedroom window. He came running into my room saying, "I know why I smell smoke. The hill's on fire." So that was fun. But I appreciate the hard work our fire department does. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitelock.
I took the opportunity to go watch the All Shook Up play. I guess it was a play. The theatrical performance. And they did a good job. It was interesting to me, the seat that I happened to sit on in Midvale, on the one side said West Jordan Council, I believe, and the other one said West Jordan Arts Committee or something. I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. We're donating money to Midvale. That's good. It's good to be a good neighbor. They did do a good job. They were very anxious to speak to me about a building, and I told them that's closed session and I wouldn't be speaking, so.
Okay, Councilmember Lamb.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to welcome our Boy Scout here with us. Thanks for joining us. And we'd be happy to accommodate your needs. If you have any, you can share them with us. Also, we talked about last time the Western Stampede, and one of the fantastic jobs that our staff did to make that pull off the Western Stampede, and I was pleased with what you guys did, so thank you for making that happen. But I neglected to mention how well our volunteers did. We had ample volunteers that put in lots of time and work in order to help pull that off as well. So thank you to all the volunteers that helped make that Western Stampede a success, and it was a fantastic success.
Thank you. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, just one quick question for Public Works regarding the new building. You may not know off the top of your head, but I'm curious if there's any update on that wooden water pipe, or the wooden pipe that was found, if that's been, if we found a home for that, been able to reconstruct that.
It's in one of our well houses. I went and confirmed that couple week well when you asked. It's put away. Once we get moved into the building, we'll figure out a spot to put that. We need to repair it though, because it's collapsed. So just for a demonstration to show what the wooden water pipe looked like back in the day. So yes, it is secured, put away. It will be.
But not ready to be displayed during the open house?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Since that's all of our communications, we'll open up for citizens' comments tonight. There are opportunities to speak, both now with citizen comments and in the public hearings. So if you'd like to save your remarks to the public hearing issues, you can certainly do that. So at this time, I don't have anyone signed up. So if there's anyone that would like to address City Council, please come forward. And there's, if you would like us to respond back to you, there's a paper on the lectern that you can put your information on.
Sounds good. Good evening. My name is Amy Martz. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a candidate for House 42 in the western part of West Jordan and South Jordan. So thanks for being here tonight, and I always enjoy your meetings.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, I will close the citizen comments and move to our consent calendar. I've been asked to pull item B from the consent calendar. Any others? Okay. I would entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I move to approve all consent items except B, as in Burton.
B is in Burton, okay.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes?
Mayor Riding,
Yes?
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
The vote passes 7 in favor.
Okay, we'll now address consent item 6B. And Councilmember Whitelock asked we pull that one, so.
I was a little concerned when I looked at this one. There were some pictures attached, and I did send an email to Justin, and he answered, so thank you. But here's my concern. It's more of a philosophy concern that I want to ensure that we're getting this philosophy through, because one of the problems in government is that, and I used to hear this all the time, about the difference between a district school and a charter school. A charter school will use used furniture, but a district school won't. And I actually learned that was accurate, because when I tried to get them to use used furniture in new buildings, I got told that that was bad. My friend got told by the union president that I was bad for thinking that way. But I don't think it's bad to remember that the money that we're allocating is not ours. It is the public's. And we need to be careful with their money. And just because at our house, when we move into a new home, maybe we get all new furniture, I think most people don't. So just because we get a new building, I don't think justifies new furniture. And I understand that things wear out, but I also understand that there's a level of care, and I think we need to take very good care of the furniture that is provided by our citizens. And I have a hard time when I looked on there and saw filing cabinets, because filing cabinets, if cared for, really don't wear out for decades. So it's more of a philosophy that I will be voting no, because I don't feel like just because we move into a new facility, we should surplus the old stuff. And what this item is surplusing furniture. And maybe some of the furniture needs to be replaced, but the photographs that were included in my packet didn't look bad to me. And I worry that sometimes when it's not our money, I certainly know with my children, when it's my money, they're very anxious and willing to spend it. When I tell them they have to spend their money, oftentimes it changes. So I just need us to all remember that it's not our money we're spending. And for that reason, I will be voting no on there. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Justin if he would come up and explain how this property will be disposed of.
So I first have to apologize for the pictures that are included in your packet. We should have included two different lists. The process that we follow when we surplus property or furniture or whatever it is we get the stuff that we found is no longer usable, no longer has any value or doesn't fulfill its purpose. And then what we do is we offer that to other city departments first. And that's what happened with our furniture. A lot of the pictures that you see in your packet is furniture that's being repurposed in other departments. We already have, I believe, 4 different desks, 2 bookshelves, 2 credenzas, and several chairs that are being repurposed to offices here at City Hall. The remaining furniture that we probably should have created the second list for you in your packet is furniture that is extremely worn out. It's breaking, it's hanging, you have a chair with 3 legs on it. It's not in a shape that it would survive a move. And so if this property isn't surplused, it would go into a pile, it would not be reused, and there's nobody that wants it. We've contacted TNT Auction, and they've said that there's no value in that furniture, and they won't accommodate us. And so that's why we are going through this process as is. We believe that there's residents and there's employees that once it's surplus, they have the opportunity to put in a silent bid and buy that furniture, rather than just throwing it in the landfill or the dump. Again, if it's usable, if it's functional, we keep it, we repurpose it. The pictures you saw is an example of furniture that's been repurposed, not the stuff that's being surplused.
How are you advertising for the sale of the remaining items? It's going through the normal advertisement process as a public sale.
It'll be required, Mayor, that it be advertised in a paper 10 days in advance prior to the sale.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions about that?
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. So in the packet, it shows 155 chairs, but some of those have been repurposed?
Yes.
Is this what is surplus?
A lot of those are just plastic 4-post chairs, and we're going to keep as many as we possibly can. Those are chairs that can be used at public gatherings or event spaces, that kind of stuff. Surplusing is really just the first step to being able to get rid of it if we need to, but a lot of the things in there, like the filing cabinets and the chairs, we're going to try to move and keep a hold of.
Okay, so when the packet has 155 chairs and we motion to surplus, we're surplusing 155 chairs even though some may stay?
Mm-hmm, that's correct.
So do we have a better process to identify what gets repurposed before we surplus?
According to the city code, the city manager has the authority to take the furniture or anything else that's being surplused and distribute it through other departments prior to it being surplus. So there is a mechanism for that to happen prior to getting to this process. That has happened for the most part. We have had several other departments that have gone out to Public Works, that have gone through what's being surplus, that have posted, noted, tagged the furniture that they're going to move to City Hall and put in other departments here. So we have followed that procedure. I haven't seen the 155 chairs that you're talking of, so I don't know specifically those chairs, but I know that there was some L-shaped desks that were in great shape. There was some credenzas that were in great shape. I know that the legal department's taking 2 of those desks. I know that the clerk's department's taking some of those desks. So we have used the process. We have through that action through the city manager that'll allow us to go out there and change it from department to department. We've already done that.
So years from now, when someone's looking back on these minutes, to me it would introduce some muddiness that the list included in the packet is 155 chairs, but they're not all being surplus. A lot of them, I'm assuming, are being repurposed. So if they're repurposed and we've declared them surplus.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, council member. The pictures sound like they would fall into that category as well, and it sounds like in the future that we need to make sure that the staff report's a little tighter.
Okay, do we allow enough time from the time that our city clerk, because we do this quarterly, so do we have enough time to where we can repurpose it before it's given to us in a packet so that we're actually surplusing actual surplusable stuff?
Well, just because an item becomes surplus doesn't mean that the city's obligated to get rid of it at that time. It just has, you're just giving us the authority that we could, if we see it that it's fit and that we need to, we now have your permission to get rid of the item. So without you surplusing an item, we can't get rid of it. With you surplusing an item according to the code, we may get rid of it. So just because you surplus something here tonight does not mean that then, in effect, we have to get rid of those 155 chairs. It would just give us, the staff and the city manager, the authority to take that action if we chose to.
So if we surplus 155 chairs, it's up to administration to determine these chairs are still usable, we'll repurpose those.
That is correct. That is correct.
The broken chairs we discard or
that is correct. The process to getting rid of them at that point would go to the code. The code says that at the discretion of the city manager, it has to go through a bid process, whether it be an auction the city manager's discretion, or that be closed bid, that those items be sold through that process. If that's not a feasible way of getting rid of them, because maybe they're just a type of an item that you can't sell through a bid process, that we would have to come back to you and have you approve of a different type of sale of that item. So,
Okay, my last thing I'll say is, I think it would be nice to have both sets of pictures, because I don't want it to skew the council that we get just the crappy pictures of the broken stuff. I think it would be nice to see pictures of things that we can repurpose and pictures of things that we're actually going to discard. So that
Yeah,
we've got a
and
clear
that's my
picture.
fault. When we took those pictures more for the purpose of the other departments to see what was available. We didn't take pictures of the stuff that we didn't think was of value. And so
Well-
we should have created two different lists.
Well, and that may be beneficial to have the pictures, here's items that we don't need anymore. Are there other departments that need them? And here are things that are broken or deteriorated and are not usable anymore,
Right.
so.
And typically on the surplus lists, it truly is it's truly items that either don't match our current system, they're valves that are worn out or broken, can't be repaired, pipe that's damaged. It's stuff that's truly unusable. This is a little bit of an unusual situation because we were just barely informed about a week or two ago that we had passed certain inspection marks on our building to allow us to move in. And so this particular surplus item is a little bit outside of that quarterly rotation that the clerk's office does. And so we're trying to keep to a time frame so that we can move into our new building and then have the old building demolished in space of our new fuel tanks and parking area and stuff. So we're kind of on a time frame, so I apologize for the report.
No problem, I think, it's just a better way. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Whitelock.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions then. Are we getting rid of employees? If we don't need the desks, then are the employees going to be gone? Or
No.
are we getting new furniture because we're getting a new building?
There's new furniture coming with the building.
Yeah. And then do you have to, Mr. Bricky, do you have to go through the surplus to change it from one department to the other?
I do not. In fact, last week I know of several members of the staff here at City Hall that were out looking at and just simply identifying what needed to be moved to their departments to be utilized.
Well, I personally would appreciate that the only thing that comes before me to surplus is something we're really surplusing, not we're just moving it around departments. Because when I look at this, I think we're just getting rid of 155 chairs and 9 filing cabinets. And I'm pretty sure most of our citizens that take the time to read everything would think the same thing. And so it muddies the waters a great deal for me. So this
Would it be helpful in
would be a
this
better
instance
process maybe.
if we pulled this item and created the two lists that Justin's described so that the record is clear about those items that we would be actually surplusing?
before we speak to that, I know that there are timelines to demo of the old building, and so if we do that and it conflicts with that timeline, we may have to move all those items out of the building to demo the building, store them until we get back to here in 2 weeks. Justin,
That's accurate.
I'm happy to vote no tonight. I don't need to delay the process. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions per se, just a couple thoughts. And I completely understand how much is on your plate and why some of this got a little bit confused or muddied was the word that was used. My thought is I'd rather hold off until we have exact numbers of exactly what's going to be discarded rather than what's going to be utilized. I'm flashing back to the experience that we recently had with the arts groups, where we had all of this equipment that had been previously surplus and only some of it had been discarded and some of it had been retained. And what had previously been surplus was then commingled with other current city assets, and it caused a lot of confusion saying, well, this has already been surplus, so we can take the whole thing. No bits and pieces had, but I would rather just do it in one fell swoop and avoid potential commingling of things that have been previously surplus with things that we're going to keep and just do it all at once in one fell swoop. And I recognize that might impact the 2-week timeline, but I would prefer that headache of the 2-week timeline to the headache of the commingling. So I would prefer to hold off and move on to the other items rather than take any action on this. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, then I'll ask for a Councilmember Jacob first, I guess.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you asking for me. No, I was just going to agree that this staff report's not ready to be voted on yet, just because it's, I mean, items, or number C in the surplus property code paragraph says it's when necessary, the city manager will give a list of stuff that is obsolete, unsuitable, and should be declared surplus. That's not the list we have. So I don't think we can do it. Normally, this kind of stuff, I don't even give it a second glance. It's just so routine and so automatic that we got a bunch of stuff that's broken. We have to go here. Because it has to come here for a surplus, I think I should give it a better look than I have. Otherwise, why do we even bother having this step in the process? So, yeah, I agree. This staff report's not ready to be rubber stamped tonight.
If there's somebody who would like to make a motion then, Councilmember Anderson?
I will. I move to table 6 items, consent item 6B, resolution 18-127 to a future date uncertain.
Second.
Well, I'd like to make an amendment to that it would be brought back in the first meeting in August rather than a date uncertain. That should be enough time for them to separate everything and get the list together. Are you okay with that amendment?
Mayor, it is possible. We do have a public meeting that's scheduled for August 1st as well, and so it could be added to that agenda.
Is August 1st enough time? That's a week from today, I believe. Is it? It's a week from today?
Yes.
A week from tomorrow?
Today.
Are you okay with August 1st then? And that change to your motion?
I saw some nodding or shaking of heads that's probably unrealistic. August 1st? Is that? Okay,
We'll make it work.
Okay, so I'll amend it to tabling this to August 1st.
And the second? We have a motion and a second discussion of the motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to say I'm in opposition to the motion just because we don't really need a motion on this one if we're not going to approve it. I would prefer that we have flexibility with staff if we tell them to bring it back on the 1st, and if that is kind of tight and they're not ready, I don't want to have something in a motion telling them here's what you must do. I would rather just give them the flexibility to bring it back as quick as they can. We don't really need a motion on this one, therefore I would be in opposition.
Well, let me ask our city attorney then, is that a proper way to do this?
You could do it either way.
Okay, well, if everybody's just in favor of moving it to August 1st, say aye. We're doing it without the motion. Oh, we got to resolve the motion issue first, don't we?
Yeah. Just vote on the motion.
So let's vote on the motion then. We're voting on the motion. Roll call vote.
Withdrawing the motion. I apologize.
Mayor, may I have a point of clarification? I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks.
Okay, if the motion's been withdrawn, then we will direct staff to bring this back on August 1st. Okay? So with that, we'll move on to our public hearings. Public hearing item 8A, receive public input and consider for approval ordinance 18-27 regarding a rezone of .88 acre for property located at 1085 West, 9000 South from A-5 agricultural 5-acre lots to PO professional office zone. River Oaks Estates, LC, Robert Barris, applicant, Scott Langford.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, this is literally years in the making. Most recently, the council reviewed this particular item last month. If you recall, this property is located, you can see the map right off of 90th South, 1075 West. The full, well, a summary of the history is located on page 2 of your staff report. Essentially, the surrounding properties to the south and west have been rezoned to professional office to match the general plan. The property owner, Mr. Robert Barris, requested that the council hold off on rezoning his property. You can see via his most recent email to the city that he's in favor now of moving forward and rezoning his property to professional office, which would allow for some good critical massing of professional office and make a nice entry to the city. So I'm happy to answer any questions if the council has any.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Councilmember Whitelock.
The only question I have is, are we looking at trying to do this as one development? Is that the goal, Scott?
That would be preferable. However, we do not have a formal application in hand. We've had some informal conversations with some commercial brokers, but we have not received anything that we can announce today. So even if we were to have it come in piecemeal, we would review those site plans and make sure that there was connectivity and flow through that. Hidden Peak Drive, as the council well knows, has some traffic challenges, and so we would most certainly review those challenges when the site plan comes in.
Okay, and keep in mind about parking, make sure we had sufficient. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant like to address the council? The applicant is here.
Good evening, I'm Robert Barris, and I'll probably be your staff's favorite person to be off the agenda after 15 years of coming back, and Scott's laughing the most. We've been trying to do several things on the property since 2004, and out of a lot of frustration and doing the best we could, we finally put another for sale sign on it, got somebody that's interested in the property, and they want professional office, and that's what the staff wants, so everybody appears to win. And so we're just here trying to get it done, and been trying to do this literally since 2004, trying to do stuff, and it looks like this is what the council would want, and this is what the city would want, and the staff would want, so it looks like it's a win-win for everybody. Any questions?
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, I'll open up the public hearing. If there's anyone present who would like to address the council on this issue, please come forward. With a reminder that you'll have 3 minutes. And if you'd like a response back, please fill out the information on the lectern.
My name is Brad Burton. I live at 8976 South, 1050 West. So my house is just on 90th there. To get out of our subdivision, you go out to 1035 West and head south. With this new development coming, I'm excited for it, but I heard the word traffic jams. There is no way to get in and out of my subdivision without taking your life into your own hands at certain times of the day. We've asked for a stoplight there for years. I've been told no. But when you increase that much more population into that street coming out of there, it's going to be ugly. Hopefully you guys will take that into consideration. Since they put those new homes down by the golf course, when I'm coming out to go to work in the morning at 6 o'clock, there's just as many people coming across 90th to get down 90th South. You know, I've lived where I've been for a number of years. In fact, I lived there when we widened 90th South, hoping that that would be the best option for that westbound traffic. My kids used to ride horse from my backyard across 90th South. Now you take your life into your own hands trying to get across 90th South. Anyway, just please address the traffic problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to address this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And open up for discussion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to express appreciation to staff and also the applicant, to Mr. Barris, for the patience and continually working with staff over these years to try and get to the best solution possible. I do agree with what Mr. Burton was suggesting with traffic, and as we're working to develop that, perhaps there's something we can work with UDOT on there. I know, Mr. Langford, we've had this one come up a couple of times and it's already on the radar, but I would underscore that concern. If there weren't two other people behind me, I'd be ready to make a motion, but I'll, seeing as they both disappeared, I move to approve ordinance 18-27.
Councilmember Whitelock.
And I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add a comment along with Councilman McConaughey's comments of the applicant and his patience in working with the city and the city's diligence in following through. But also I'd like to add Councilman McConaughey's work that he's done on this. And as I recall, several months ago when this came up before, Councilman McConaughey's the one that wanted to have this tabled so we could make some other adjustments. And I'm pleased with the adjustment that's come, and I think this is going to be a great avenue. And I agree with Mr. Burton about the traffic issues over there, and those have been looked at, and I will follow through on that to make sure those are continued to look at. There is actually one other entrance that takes you over on 13th West, but it's not very convenient at all from where you're living. So I would be in support of the motion.
Councilmember Anderson.
And I'm just going to ditto Councilmember McConaughey and Councilmember Burton. This is how patience and economic development to get the right thing to come in pays off. So I just want to thank Mr. Barris and all those that have worked on this. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Public hearing item 8B, receive public input, consider for approval resolution 18-131, amending the salary schedule for fiscal year 2018-2019. Melena Murray.
Mayor, City Council, I will be handling that for Ms. Murray this evening. So
Okay.
Once the public hearing is concluded, I'll try to answer any questions regarding the documents. I think it's about 9 pages, and try to explain how we've proceeded to this point. Thank you.
Okay, with that then we will open this for public hearing. Those wish to address this item on the agenda, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and go back to our city manager and respond. He can respond to any questions as well from council members.
Thank you. Each year, it's important to remain competitive with the different positions and the pay. There have been questions that have been asked as it's presented. What does the numbers here that, represent? The pay ranges are there for the minimum and maximums of what someone serving in that position would be paid. It does not include their benefits. The benefit package is similar across the board for all employees, depending on if they're asking for individual or family. But each year, this is basically analyzed, I suppose, from the standpoint of the community to say, how many employees do we have? If you look at the bottom of the document, page 9, excuse me, I think it's page 8, you'll see exactly how many full-time and part-time employees we have. Presently, as of July 25th, 475 full-time employees, 148 part-time. Those full-time employees are all receiving benefits that are not reflected in these numbers, but are part of that ultimate salary that they're getting paid. I just want to make sure that's clear. This is only addressing with, for example, in events and recreations, you have the 2 full-time employees and presently no part-time employees, but that's hopefully clear after my explanation. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Do you know what our turnover rate is, as far as how many employees we retain, how many we lose? Do you happen to know that?
We're working on analyzing that. Ms. Murray, when she arrived, had a lot of challenge. The entire HR department actually has, we're redrafting the employee handbook. The retention and the turnover is unique to our city, and we haven't been keeping track of that. She's trying to figure that out presently. One of the big departments where we're interested in, two departments, fire and police, we're interested in seeing what the turnover rates are and who are those individuals that are retiring and leaving. I know today I received notice of 3 additional police officers that are retiring. I know of 1 firefighter that's retiring. So keeping those numbers in sight of what we need to accomplish year after year is something that Melena's working on, but I cannot provide them tonight.
Okay, and I just want to say I'm appreciative that the change over a year is 5 full-time employees and a reduction of 2 part-time. That is not a conversion of part-time to full-time. So the reduction of 2 part-time employees from last year, we had 150 part-time last year and 148 this year. Those are not conversions to full-time, are they?
Not that I'm aware of. There is one that will be taking place that we'll be asking you for consideration in in December of this year. That is down in the attorney's office. We had a grant-funded position that the 2 grants allowed for a part-time victim advocate, legal assistant, and we're going to put that together and have funding to provide for full-time. But if you're doing that full-time, the city does have to accommodate the insurance requirements under state or federal health care requirements.
Okay.
But I am not aware of any of those, to answer your question specifically, that have been converted to full-time.
And if this, I'm sorry, if this is adopted tonight, does that also fix the salary schedules?
That's a separate form, and we've been working on that and identifying the scales from the 14 steps to make sure each of the cells is accurate. As I understand it, it's now accurate.
Okay. Thank you. That's where I was kind of headed. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. One quick question. The number of employees listed here, is that authorized positions or is that actual employees that are employed?
Authorized positions, and once you vote, they will be formalized.
And some of the positions that are showing on this list are former positions that are no longer with the city. We redid some of the departments, as you can see on there, the deputy city manager position's on there, and that's no longer a position that's with the city, but because it was in the past year, it's included in the list. So it's showing you some positions that no longer exist as well.
Right, so for example, it shows 87 crossing guards. We may have 85 or 84 crossing guards, but we can't have more than 87 crossing guards. Just
That's correct.
As an example. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? And I'll entertain a motion. Is what? Oh, sorry. We need to,
Had that. Yeah.
nobody wanted to speak to it. So Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to point out that when you're looking at headcount for wastewater, we've got 10 this year and then 13 slated to be approved. I know public safety receives a lot of comment, but those folks in the utilities groups do a lot of work, and they've been stretched really, really far. It's amazing what they've been able to accomplish with the equipment and the staffing and everything that they've been given. So I'm very excited to see that number being adjusted to 13. It's very much needed there. Nobody else has hit their button, so I will follow that comment up with a motion to approve Resolution 18-131.
Councilmember Anderson?
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. A discussion to the motion. No discussion, so let's vote.
Councilmember McConaughey? Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Mayor Whiting?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Public hearing item 8C, continued until August 8th, 2018. This shows that a motion is required. This item is to receive public input and consider for a resolution amending the uniform fee schedule for fiscal year 2018-2019. So is there a motion to continue this item until August 8th?
So moved.
Councilmember Burton.
So moved.
And Councilmember
Second.
McConaughey. We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion? Seeing none, then we will vote.
Mayor Whiting?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Business items. Business item 9A, reconsideration, discussion, and possible action regarding Resolution 18-117, amending the water rates for fiscal year 2018-2019. I brought this back because after I thought about this, after our last council meeting, even though we did pass a 10% commodity increase on the water, I just felt like we weren't going to.
We need a motion to reconsider first.
Okay, I'm explaining why I brought it back, and then we can do that.
Oh, okay.
That I felt like I wanted to bring this back for reconsideration because I didn't feel like I had made the correct decision. So with that little bit of explanation, we need a motion to bring it back, and I will make that motion to bring it back for consideration, and I would need a second.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
So we have a motion and a second to bring this back for discussion. Is there a discussion on that motion? Seeing none, let's vote on that motion. Oh, excuse me,
comment?
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have a question. So if this is brought back for reconsideration, does that undo what was passed last time?
No, you just have to have a motion to reconsider, and then you have the discussion.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Ready?
Ready.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
No.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Mayor Whiting?
Yes.
The vote passes 6-1 in favor.
So now, after my little explanation, and this has come back for reconsideration, I would like to open this up for discussion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Personally, I'm happy with where it ended last time, so I'd be curious to understand your thought on it. You mentioned you didn't feel like you had made the right decision. What did you feel like the proper course of action would have been?
Well, I felt like the proper course of action would have been to approve the entire resolution as it was. And the reason I felt that way was because of the needs that are out there for 2 water tanks. And what I've been told is there's a possibility of even having reduced building permits because we may not have water availability at some point in the future if those tanks aren't built. And I just felt like in order to get what we've asked our capital projects group to give us that information, and they're telling us that we need that. We need those water tanks in order to provide water for future needs of the city. That I felt like I needed to bring it back for discussion because I felt like the 10% was good, but it wasn't all that is needed by the city. And in order to build those water tanks, we have to pass that resolution as it was presented originally. So, Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I had voted against this last meeting, but not due to the amount, but due to the timing on there. I felt that our residents are paying a higher water bill right now, and they'll continue to do so through the summer months. So if this goes into effect the date that was proposed originally, that means not only they're using more water in August, so their bill is going to be higher, but then we're going to bump it up even higher with the rate increase and make it go even higher. I would like to see it happen in January when they're paying less, and so their increase is smaller then, and it works up to it through next year. So my first thought is, whatever changes we make, I'd still like to see it happen in January when the water bills for residences are lower. For commercial, I don't see it make much difference because they generally use similar amounts in the summer and in the winter. And a couple of things that we talked about last time, and maybe you could help me with that. We were talking about having 2 tanks. One is a new tank to do a new area that we can use our impact fees to pay for. And the other is a tank in an existing area that we use rate increase to cover. And if that's the case, in my mind, I'm thinking the impact fees could still go with the new tank and not delay the permits, whereas the additional tank for the existing area would be delayed due to our delay on doing the rate increase, which people there would still have water. We just wouldn't have the backup volume that we desire as soon as we'd want.
Okay, I'm going to ask staff to come and respond to those issues. I'm going to ask Dave Murphy first to come up and.
So the first question about impact fees paying for these tanks and which one is being paid for by impact fees and which one's being paid for by rates.
Correct.
User rates. The Zone 5 tank would be an impact fee tank. The way impact fees work and the Tischler-Bice report that we gave you last year shows is those impact fees are collected in arrears of the tank physically going actually out in the ground. So what happens is you approve the impact fees, those impact fees are collected at the building permit stage, and so those impact fees are collected over time, and it takes 2 to 4 to 6 to 10 years, or whatever your rate of building permits are, to collect those fees to pay for that tank. So impact fees do pay for it, but you have to have the bond coverage first in order to build the tank, and that's the difference. So with the second tank at Airport, that is a change on an existing condition. So it's going from a 2.5 million gallon tank to a 4 million gallon tank. And that tank is under what would be called an existing deficiency condition, or it's needed now and it's needed by the existing residents, so it must be covered by rates.
Okay, so to clarify on the one by the airport, we are replacing the existing tank, we're not just adding an additional tank?
That's correct. The 2.5 million gallon tank that's there is 45 years old, and it is been repaired this year, but it still needs to come down and be replaced.
So while that is being replaced, what do we do for water in that area? Do we use another tank and bypass that temporarily?
There's 2 tanks on the site, and the 4 million gallon tank will have to be the storage tank that pumps everything to the west during the time of construction, yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. The residents wouldn't pay initially whenever this was adopted if they're on equal pay, because we only make those changes in October. So just the way which I'm not a fan of, that we only make adjustments for everybody at one time during the year. So that's just a comment of what you were saying. So if you're on equal pay, it won't matter until October. Then it matters. And so I just had a question, and maybe Dave Zobel could answer this one. So what we passed 2 weeks ago with the 10% on the commodity and nothing on the availability, did we come into compliance with the bond that we're committed to?
No.
And I don't know if this would be Dave or Scott, but there was talk about Zone 5 maybe having a reduction or a stoppage of issuing building permits or something because we're low on, we don't have the capacity of water. Is that, or maybe that's Public Works? or looks like Dave does.
Presently in your system, you are bypassing Zone 5. There is zero storage in Zone 5. It pumps from Zone 4 to Zone 6, and then through PRVs, it comes back into Zone 5. So essentially what the 2015 Water Master Plan report pointed out to everyone is we're burning energy to pump that water up the hill instead of having a subset of storage in Zone 5 for Zone 5 itself. And so with that identification, the money savings over time for the pumping cost to go to Zone 6 and then back to 5 pays for the storage project and the pump project for pumping directly into storage in Zone 5. It takes about 20 years to get there plus, but you pay for that project in the savings of the pumping costs. And that's a $7 million savings over time, and that's significant. So that was why it was placed into the master plan as a project, because of that significant savings. After you pay for that project over 20 years, you have 30 years worth of a project that is essentially already paid for itself. Because it's a 50-year project.
So does that create an issue where we're not able to issue building permits in Zone 5 because there's no storage?
It can. And really, we're talking about peaking storage and pumping capacity for all of Zone 5 and 6 together when you start looking and analyzing for building permits. And we wanted to avoid that.
Okay, I've only been on the council for, I think, a year and a half, and we've spent a lot of time on water. It would be, this is more of a comment than anything, not directed at anybody, but it'd just be nice to have a plan of where we're going with our water and not having to discuss this and add and subtract. Seems like every council meeting. It's not, but it feels that way sometimes. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions for Mr. Murphy. I appreciate Councilmember Burton's thoughts about waiting on any change in rates until water usage that begins in January, so hit the first bill in February or so. And I would be amenable to a change along those lines. But my biggest issue, I understand the need for the project, I support the project, it's the funding mechanism where I feel like the balance between the availability charge and the commodity charge is so disproportionate, and there's so much more being paid for by residents on the commodity charge, or excuse me, on the availability charge, that's going to offset some of the heavier commercial users that I would be an absolute no to changing anything that would impact the residential availability charge. I would be amenable to a motion that would change the effective date of what was done to come into play first part of the new year, however. When Councilmember Anderson talked about wanting to have a plan to know exactly where we're trying to go, I don't disagree with that either. I like what Mr. Bricky suggested at our last council meeting, which was take the information that I had gathered and I had churned through and see if we can have an outside firm refute or support my conclusion from that analysis with changing the balance of the availability and commodity rates. And I would be happy to move forward with that. In fact, I would probably work in line with what Councilmember Burton's suggesting towards the first of the year. So my recommendation would be to maintain what we have that's already been passed, with exception perhaps of the effective date. But then once we have additional information from that third-party group, whether it's Zions Bank or whoever that comes in and helps affirm the numbers that I shared last week, at that point when we hear back from them, then we make a change on that side if it's appropriate. But based on what I saw when I did my analysis, we are incredibly disproportionately heavy on that commodity or on that availability charge. So I really do not want to see any changes to that for the residents. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I have repeatedly said that we're not planning far enough ahead. I am very, very, now I wasn't here when we discussed this last time, and but I did watch the meeting, mostly live, and I did listen in on the discussion and saw the presentation. And I'm very much opposed to emergency rate changes. We have to do this right now, or else we can't do X, Y, or Z. Well, how long ago did we know that we needed to do this right now? Could we have voted on this 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago? I very much think we need to look beyond the next council meeting. Not necessarily us as the 7 of us, but the staff needs to bring this to us further in advance. We know when water tanks are gonna need to be built. Hopefully we have some idea, at least a couple years down the road. Let's get our ducks in a row in advance. I'm very much opposed to, you have to pass this right now or else we won't be able to X, Y, or Z. Doesn't sit well with me. For that reason, I guess I can't say I'll be in favor or opposed because I don't know what's gonna be proposed yet, so it's just my 2 cents.
There is a motion on the table. We're discussing that motion.
There's a motion on the table. Melanie left. I don't think there's a motion.
Do we not make a motion yet?
We haven't made a motion yet.
Oh, good.
I was gonna say, I need that read back to me. Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 quick thoughts. I too agree with everyone that's talked about planning ahead. It sounds like we need the 2 tanks, but rather than making the decision now so we can start doing it tomorrow, let's find a way so we can come back 3 months or 6 months from now and put this in front of the council, say, yes, let's go ahead and get those tanks and get the money that we need to. The second thing that I was worried about, and this was brought up by the chamber last time when they were here about the water, is the businesses have plans for the year. So I don't want to wait until December to make this decision. We need to let the businesses know so that they can plan ahead and they can start doing their budgeting. So if we do put it off, which is what we've been doing, we need to do it before November so that our businesses can know that they're going to have that extra increase for water when it comes up. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I just really want to echo what Councilmember Lamb just said, because I think that's the key, is that we need to balance the 2. We need to do something a little more long range than what is before us now, but we need to get it done so that businesses can plan. So I need the long-term planning. It just, what we're trying to accomplish tonight, I worry will not totally meet our needs. It will meet today's need, but tomorrow you'll come back and that's going to be problematic. It's not just a problem for businesses, it is a problem for families as well. We have to budget in our homes, and if every other month the city's coming before us and saying, we need 25 cents more, it's not very much, just 25 more cents, well, it adds up. So I need a long-term plan.
Well, I'd prepare to make a motion then and see if it gets a second. That is to approve resolution 18-117 effective January 1, 2019. Councilmember McConaughey. Oh, you went off. We're changing the 10%. If we approve this, it changes what we did last time. Is that correct from our attorney's office?
It's 16% in your notes.
That is correct.
So it's a higher amount.
It is. Okay, the motion fails for lack of a second. Councilmember Burton.
So I would move to approve resolution 18-117, but move the effective date to January 1st, 2019.
That was a motion that was just on the table.
That's with the 10%, not the full 16%.
You already have the 10% passed.
We do, but I'm changing the date to January 1st, so it's not sooner.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify, the same thing that was passed at the prior council meeting, however, instead of being effective, my mouse is dying, except instead of being effective, what was it, September 1st and build in, no. The resolution that was passed was effective for all water used after August 1st to be built and collective started in September. This would be the same thing with the 10%, just on the commodity, not touching the availability, and would be effective January 1st, 2019, to be billed and collected starting February 2019. Is that correctly understanding the motion?
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure this is getting us anywhere that we weren't already there. In fact, it's pushing it a little further out, which I appreciate the long-term vision component of that. However, it seems to me we might as well not do anything, right? Because this is not raising enough revenue to build the water tanks or to service the debt or whatever the, insert your justification here. It doesn't get us from point A to point B. It gets us from point A to point A and a half. So I'm not sure why we're doing this as opposed to leaving it the way it is. If the way it is paying for what we have now, and doing this is not going to pay for the improvements that we need, why are we doing this? So I'm not 100% sure I'm in favor at this point.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the concerns about it last time is if we wait until January 1st, how much debt will we be in with water between now and January 1st? And I know I talked to David a little bit after City Council last time. If we were to wait until January to make any changes, what kind of financial issues will we have with water in the next, let's say, 4 months?
Well, you're just out of compliance with your charges that you have for your current debt service. I mean, to do that, if you just want to do commodity, you'd have to raise that by 16% and not touch the availability to stay, with your debt service coverage ratio. And that's no tanks, but that's just staying, at that 1.25 times for what you already have on the books.
So I guess my concern, and I'm trying to understand the numbers, is if we wait until January 1st for the 10%, we really need 16% January 1st instead of 10.
Well, no, you need it now, but if you want to wait till January 1st, and you're not going to have the higher bills in the summertime and so on and so forth, I'd hate to postulate an estimate on what that would take to get that done.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Even if we change the rates effective for a February billing date, still doesn't affect those residents on equal pay until October of 19. So there's a revenue deficit there. And I have to agree with Council Member Jacob. I don't know that I can be behind this motion. It changes absolutely nothing. We're still out of compliance with our bond covenants. And I don't know, I don't know if this is for Mr. Wall or Mr. Bricky, but are there consequences for being out of compliance? I mean, are there penalties? What are the consequences for not being in compliance with our bond?
I haven't looked at these specific bond documents, so I can't comment on those specifically, but generally there's two things that can happen. Number one, it's a breach of contract. Now, whether or not the bondholders would seek to enforce that, which would mean getting a declaratory judgment telling the city council to raise the bond rates, or to declare the city in default, which would then lead to number two, it destroys your bond rating to get future financing for other capital improvement projects. Again, I haven't looked at these specific documents, so I'd have to look through them to see what particular remedies there are in those, but generally that's what happens.
Okay. I don't know that we're solving anything, and it feels to me that we're just doing what's been done in the past, which I'm not a fan of. We as a council and as a city have some hard choices to make to get where we need to be, and this doesn't present a plan. This doesn't solve our compliance of a bond. We're just punting like all councils prior have done, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So, a couple of thoughts. The reason for doing this now is because traditionally we have changed rates during the summer in time for the new fiscal year, which starts July 1st. Historically, we've almost always done it this time of year, though the last 2 years with the former city manager, things got a little bit skewed, and were somewhat delayed. So in defense of staff bringing it up right now, I would say historically that's what we've done. It's always been with the budget, we've changed the rates for the utility fees and the enterprise funds at the same time we've done the rest of the budget. So that's why it's hitting at this point. Though typically it's closer to May, but when we did have the conversations in May, we kind of pushed things back. The thought process about doing this now, if it doesn't get us all the way there, why go just halfway? Well, halfway is better than not doing anything at all. It's getting us a little bit closer. The other thing that I'm curious about is what was requested was an 8% increase on the commodity charge and an 8% increase on the availability charge. I don't see how the math on that works, where we're being told it's a 16% on the commodity that would be needed to equal the 8% for each of those, because some of our commercial customers may be paying $2,000 a month for the availability charge, which would be an extra $200 a month, but their usage is north of $13,000, so that would be an extra $1,300 a month. So the 10% on just the availability, or 10% on just the commodity, should bring us a whole lot closer. So we shouldn't need 16% to get to that same place, if I'm understanding right. But I haven't seen the equation, so I may be off. But that's where I'm struggling, because 16% just doesn't sound like the right number. And like I said, I'd be happy to get us closer there. I'd rather not wait and do nothing. By setting this in motion with the January 1st effective date, we do have a little bit of time to make any changes that are needed. I do worry about some of those larger commercial customers. Like I was saying, some people are paying quite a bit. I mean, north of $10,000 or $15,000 a month for the usage, and if that jumps up by 10% in the next month or two, yes, many of them are accustomed to expecting the change at this time of year, but usually it's closer to the 4% to 6% range. I think 10% might throw things off. So as I've thought about this a little bit more, while I'm happy with what we set last time, I do think Councilmember Burton's right with the timing of this and setting it to be effective starting in January. The other thing that does for us is it gives us a good catalyst to move everything over for, as far as the utility fees go and the enterprise funds, to have them go into effect January 1st going forward. We've had this conversation every one of the 6, almost 7 years that I've been on the council, saying we should change when these rates go into effect and do it at the first of the year, but we've never taken the step to get there. So even if we're only getting halfway there, by changing the timeline, I think we're still taking a big step forward to help people be able to plan a little bit better. I'd also echo what Councilmember Lamb said, where we need to have the final number figured out sooner rather than later. I know a lot of companies are in the middle of doing their budgeting for next year right now, so I would hope that we could have a final number no later than the last meeting of September for what would go into effect in January. But I'm supportive of what was suggested. I think it does get us going down the right path. I think we're getting closer to where we need to be. It may not be 100% of the way there, but given the disparity that we talked about last time, I still go back to thinking some of these residential water users are being charged over 40% more than what their actual financial impact is on the system, and I can't justify raising that another 10%. So I'm still a solid no on changing the availability charge for those residential users. Thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Last time when we raised this, we had lots of discussions, and that's when we spent a lot of time looking over the numbers, and that's when we raised it up to $1.50 per million gallons, or whatever that number was. I think it was $1.50. And at that time, we felt that we had, well, not only felt, we got feedback from many users that was a big jump that we did. And they said, instead of having the big jump, can't you just give us some smaller steps instead? And so here I'm proposing taking some smaller steps. True, it's not the big jump that's going to get us the whole distance, but we're eating the big elephant and we're taking some small bites. And then sometimes we don't even know if it's an elephant yet. Every time we look at this, it seems to change what beast we're looking at. And so once we get this study from there, then we'll know exactly what we are taking bites of and can take the bites the right way. So to not take any bites at all means we're going to take a bigger bite that we may not be able to digest when we wait and do it later. So my purpose of doing this is to get somewhere, because we know we need to take another bite. We don't know exactly the amount that bite's going to be, depending on how we do the commodity, along with the availability charge and how that interacts and raises everybody all together. So that is why I'm making this proposition to this motion.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Call the question, please.
Say again?
Call the question.
She called the question, so we need to vote.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Okay, let's vote on calling the question. Ready? Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
No.
Councilmember Jacob,
No.
Councilmember McConaughey,
No.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
No.
Vote fails 3-4.
So now what's next on this thing? We just keep talking, okay? Any further discussion then before we vote on the main motion? Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I imagine that those of us that voted no had more to say, so I think we should say it. Just while we have this subject before us, I noticed that Riverton City put out a press release today. Breaking news came over my email alert or whatever. Riverton City calls on residents to reduce water usage by 25%. Residents and businesses. And that's cool, and I think that's a good idea, and I think we should probably say the same thing. Obviously, our city's not quite in the same situation necessarily, and we're talking about something a little bit different today as far as finances goes, but I think that's a worthwhile thing to bring up, and I think we should start in our own backyard, the big one right over here, big backyard. You know, it's got a driveway that goes all the way around it, a couple of entrances. You know, let's see if we can't reduce our own water usage to start with. Less of a drain on the whole system. But at the same time, yeah, I do have a question on this, on the motion on the table, and that is, does it include the ongoing 3.5% increases that are in the original,
No, I think,
the original, whatchamacallit?
no. Did you want to comment on that? My understanding is that we're just voting on whether we're going to keep what was voting on last time, only extending it to January 1st.
Right,
So
and not having been here last time, I just want to
It
make
was
sure
just a
that I
10%,
understand.
it was a 10% increase.
Just for right now, no future increases planned at
Right.
all? Okay, thanks. I'm probably going to be in opposition.
Councilmember Anderson.
So the goal, as what's been explained here on the dais, is that we want to move it, which I support, to January. My concern is that if we're still out of compliance with the bond, and I can't help but think that water's going to come up at some point in 2019, probably not in January, to make up for some deficiency. So again, I don't know that we're solving anything that hasn't been done in the past. I do agree with Councilmember McConaughey that I worry about what our availability charge is, and I think we need to shift to, I won't call it a different model, but however was planned before with the prior council and prior administration has a lot of shortcomings. My concern is that doing 10% now, 10% effective in January, that it's going to be at least that by the time we get to next January, and we haven't really solved just having a simple 5-year plan. I don't see us being able, if we adopt the 10%, I don't see us being able to only wait until next January to do another rate increase on water. I suspect there will be something come up mainly because we're not in compliance with the bond. I mean, I don't want to do 16% on availability. I've looked at water districts throughout Salt Lake County, and at $1.50, we're still the lowest of about 10 that I looked at. Some are $2.34 per 1,000 gallons that service parts of our city. And so I don't know, it would be nice to have a rate that we meet the covenants that we've signed, and we do incremental rates every January to match what Jordan Valley Water Conservancy is charging us on the wholesale rate. That's where I want to get to. I'm really struggling with the motion that's on the table because I don't believe we're solving anything. In fact, I think we're probably delaying water tanks, and I truly believe, I'm not willing to bet, but I truly believe that water will come back up prior to July of 2019, or right around summer of 2019, because something's amiss. So I don't know that I'm supportive of the motion that's on the floor right now. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So last thought, we are somewhat flying blind. There's some information that would be very helpful to have, which we don't yet. Specifically, as we talked at our last council meeting about getting the study done to show where the appropriate balance would be between that commodity charge and the availability charge, so we can make the adjustments as needed. Like I said last time, I would imagine that come January, we'll probably be seeing, at least I would expect to see, an increase in the actual water rate, but a decrease in the availability charge. I think, at least the numbers that I saw, it looks like it's closer to $2.20 per 1,000 gallons to actually pump water through our system. And right now, where we're only at $1.50, so much of that is falling on the availability charge that those larger water users are getting a substantial subsidy from those lower water users. And that's why I really can't support the similar increase to both the availability and the commodity. I would suggest that even if you don't think this is perfect, what was passed last time was the same thing, but going into effect starting in about a week. So at a minimum, if you're not supportive of that, I would suggest supporting this motion that would push that to going into effect in January. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some information to not be making decisions somewhat in the dark, but we'll be able to have better information as we go forward in January. Then we can clearly say, this is where we want to be, this is how we get there. But that said, I do feel like we are taking the right steps. We are taking steps in the right direction with this. So I would just encourage that thought process. Even if you're not completely supportive, or if you think it has flaws, well, those flaws would be going into play in about a week. Or we can support the motion, and those same flaws, at least it's pushed back till January. And again, the biggest benefit of that is it gives our larger users time to plan for it and accommodate their budgets to match what's needed. So it may not be perfect. I'm sure it's not perfect, but we'll be getting a little bit closer, and hopefully we can get some more information soon. So thank you, Mayor.
Let's vote.
So for just clarification, we're voting on the 10% effective on January 1st, 2019 usage and billed in February, correct? Okay. Councilmember Anderson?
No.
Councilmember Jacob?
No.
Mayor Riding?
No.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
No.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
The vote fails 3-4.
No further discussion on item 9A. We'll move to item 9B. Electronic Communications, Open Meetings Act, and Conflict of Interest. Rob Wall.
Mayor and Council, I've had a couple of questions come to me that I felt like I needed to address. We're not going to go through full-blown discussions of the Open Meetings Act or the Ethics Act. I know you had a discussion in January before I got here on the Ethics Act. I've looked through the slides. It was very good. And on the Open Meetings Law, you all have access to the either the State Treasurer's website or the AG's website. Both of them have a good slideshow on that too. So that's not my intent. I just want to address a couple of issues. A question was asked to me several months ago about you communicating with each other through the email and whether that constitutes a meeting. And let me just say from the outset, our Open Meetings Act was not written and has not been significantly revised since the era of personal electronic communication devices have even been a thing. And so many of these questions do not have an answer based on a judicial interpretation of what the legislature meant when they passed the Open Meetings Act, because in an era where there was no electronic personal communication capability. But I just want to give you my opinion. Under the Open Meetings Law, if 4 of you meet together to discuss city business, you are essentially holding a meeting, which requires notice requirements, And as a result, if you, in my opinion, if 4 of you engage in a discussion of an issue through email or through text, that is a meeting under the Open Meetings Law. You might find differing opinions about that. I know that the League's legal counsel had a different opinion about that 3 or 4 years ago and has since changed his opinion. Most city attorneys I've talked with agree with what I just told you, and that is if 4 of you engaged in a string of email, a string of text, that's considered deliberation. And if you read the opening statement in the Open Meetings Act, the purpose of the act is to encourage city councils to deliberate and make decisions openly. The only situation that I know of in Utah where there has been pushback on that publicly to a level that arose to newspaper articles, never in a court case, haven't had one yet. It was a city that I won't name, but it was a city up north who through a string of emails discussed a salary, interestingly enough, a salary scale presentation or proposal that was being made by the city staff to the city council, similar to what Mr. David Bricky talked with you about tonight. In that particular situation, over a period of about 3 to 4 months, there were numerous newspaper articles in the local papers, both local to the city as well as the Tribune and the Deseret News. And there was quite a public outcry. And as a result, those that were involved in the communications, I think, had a significant amount of egg on their face and took some pretty hard hits politically. But once again, there has never been a court ruling in Utah as to whether or not a string of emails constitutes a meeting. My advice to you is that because it's not clear in the law, that you lean back on the intent language in the state code, and that is that you deliberate and meet openly. And to the extent that you're concerned that that may be perceived by the public, your constituents, the news media, whoever, that by participating in a string of emails or text messages or whatever the media may be as a meeting, then I would avoid that if I was an elected official. The second issue I wanted to talk to you about is this here, and don't worry about C for a minute. I've got that on a separate slide. I'm not sure why that showed up on my thumb drive. It's not the computer's fault, and it's not Mr. Langford's fault. It's my fault. User error. But I had a question come up about what does it mean now to attend a council meeting when our council meetings are broadcast and they're being streamed? Because you have a provision in your rules that says persons attending council meeting are to refrain from using and shall turn off audible features of cellular telephones, audible pages, or other communication devices while meetings are in session. If you're asking me what that means, I would say that that means attending here in person, because the whole the entire reading of that sentence seems to be about disrupting this meeting. But I didn't write that, and I don't know what you all think it means. But that's how I'd interpret that. I just want to throw that out to you so you know it's there. In the future, perhaps later in the fall, after we finish the budget process and some of these other issues that are really important right now, we may want to schedule a work session and just go through some of these provisions and see what you all think. These are your rules. They're not governed, the state hasn't imposed these on you. This is something that is unique to West Jordan. Scott, if you go to the next one. This one, however, is a little bit more problematic, but once again, I'm not asking for a discussion tonight, although if you would like to discuss it, we can. But it's something that we should visit in the future. It's improper for a person attending a public meeting to use personal electronic means to send or receive communications to or from council members or to or from staff during that meeting. There's a couple of interesting questions here. For you, elected officials, there's a specific way for you to, quote, attend, end quote, your city council meetings electronically, as you know. There's a process by which we notice that there will be one or two of you or whoever not here. The majority of you have to be present. You have to have an anchor location, which typically is this room. But under the current law, the way it's written, you attend, and you can only attend electronically and participate, vote, so forth, unless the city follows that electronic meeting process. What if you're away and you're simply following the meeting now streaming, and you're sending communications to or from council members or staff during that meeting? Are you attending that meeting? I don't know. I didn't write this. If you're doing that, are you meeting the intent of open deliberation where the public can see you or hear you when you're communicating with other council members or the staff? It's for you to decide. Again, I'm just pointing this out to you. This is very unique to this city. I've never seen this particular provision in another city. Doesn't mean there isn't one. There may be. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's one that now we're streaming meetings, I think has a little bit different relevance than it did perhaps when it was written in 2013. Something that we probably at some future point ought to address. And if you go, Scott, to the next one. And then the part C of this rule is a person who violates these provisions. There's two things here just to be aware of. Is disorderly, and the relevance of that means not only could you be evicted, and it's not only you, it could be anyone sitting in any of these chairs. You could be evicted, but also because you're declaring it disorderly by ordinance, then what follows is that arguably you have now committed a Class B misdemeanor of disorderly conduct because you have declared by council policy, legislative act, that violating the communication devices provisions in a council meeting is disorderly conduct for which you could be prosecuted. Again, that's just an argument that could be made. I can think of another argument that you're not disorderly under state law. I don't know whether that would win or lose. It's never been tried. But you can make an argument that there's probable cause to believe that you committed a crime. Once again, my concern here isn't that any of us are violating the law or not violating the law. My concern is that I want you all to be aware that these provisions are in place. Scott, if we could go back one slide. One other thing about this one now, look at that second phrase, or that second line, attending a public meeting to use personal electronic means. What does that mean? Does that mean now then that I can use city electronic means to communicate, but if I own a personal cell phone, which I do, and I do my city business on this, and the reason I do is that I'm an old guy and I can barely juggle this, and I do not carry a personal phone and a city phone, and I refuse to because I'll lose them. And what's the risk of doing that? If I'm ever subpoenaed for records of my business, I have to give this to the judge. And you know what? This is me. If a judge cares about what my wife bought for her birthday, I don't care. I'm human. I have skeletons in my life, but it's just more of a convenience. And maybe someday I'll get burned and I'll regret it, but that's me personally. But it does raise the question, personal electronic means, does that mean your own device, or does that simply mean a personal electronic device, like a tablet, like one of these, like an iWatch? Is that what they're called? I don't have one, so I don't know. Again, this was written before we start streaming our meetings. And so I think it would be prudent for us to revisit these provisions sometime in the near future to clarify what you seven would like to have happening here in the meetings. Anyway, that's why I bring this up. And, the only other thing I wanted to mention was I know that Mr. Bricky reached out to the seven of you and to make sure that each of you had completed your conflict of interest forms. Make sure those are filed with their city recorder. And just to remind you that throughout the year, if your status changes, the state statute and the city code requires you to update those. That's something that I have found over the years, and I would probably do the same thing. And you can ask those who work with me closely. They'll tell you how sometimes I can be absent-minded. Just a reminder that if your status professionally does change,
And
fill
just
out
to
a new form.
interrupt, we changed the form. I've handed out one tonight. Councilwoman Burton has the new version. I'll be handing out the other 6 to the rest of you as soon as the meeting's over.
Thank you, Mr. Bricky. We're also revising these for the employees because there's an additional part there that is very common with a lot of employees, and that is outside employment. And the way the old form was written, it really talks about outside business interests, and it doesn't really accomplish what needs to happen in the city in terms of reporting by employees to the department head and their city manager. But that's also being worked on at the time, right now. I'm finished with my formal part. If you're interested in the city up north, I've got a copy of one of the newspaper articles. It's kind of interesting reading. I'm happy to send it to you. Or if you have questions related to any of this, or if you have any questions you want to talk about related to ethics or Open Meetings Act, I'm happy to do that also. I'm not the ethics police per se. You do have an obligation, or excuse me, a right, and I have a fiduciary duty to you that if you do ever have a question under the state or the city Ethics Act, you can request from me a formal opinion. And I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy to talk to you on the phone. I've talked to a couple of you about that. And I'm more than happy to give you my perspective and even suggestions if you have a question on something as to how to proceed.
Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Scott.
Business item 9C, discuss fiscal year 2018-2019 budget and Truth and Taxation public hearing scheduled for Tuesday, August 14th. David Bricky.
Thank you, Council. This next 2 presentations are just to help explain some of those requests that were made in the green sheets. If you'll recall, when I initially came before the council, I asked for as much as a 30% increase. That was not approved by the council, but I do want the council as a whole to hear from these 2 departments, keeping in mind what would potentially be needed as early as this December, January, when we adjust the budget generally at that time. Thank you.
Public Works.
Justin Stoker will be presenting on this.
So I was asked to talk about the green sheets that had been submitted and are recommended for approval from the Public Works Department, those funds that impact the general fund. We've got 3 green sheets that spread 3 different categories, and I'll go over those to help explain what's going on with those. The first one from our streets department is a brine system. We submitted a green sheet there for the brine system in an amount of $135,000. For those of you that may or may not be familiar with the brine system, it's one of the tools in snow removal. UDOT, for example, when they've got a brine system, ahead of a snowstorm, they'll go out with a truck and they'll spray the intersections and arterials down with brine rather than waiting for snow to fall and then putting salt on. Several studies have been done on brine systems and have found that it's much more effective to pre-treat the roads. Once once snow has melted or is bonded to pavement, it's much harder to remove with the snow plows. By putting down that brine as a pre-application or pre-storm application, it makes it much more effective for the plows to remove the snow off the road. It's also much more labor efficient, where you can have a single truck go and spray the brine on the arterials and the intersections. It's much more effective to do that than it is to have an army of trucks coming in after the fact once you have a couple of inches of snow and trying to catch up to that removal. One of the other advantages of a brine system is that you can pre-wet the granular salt. It allows the salt to already begin activating. It sticks to the pavement. A study was done back east where they did the dry salt versus wetting the salt and found that 30% of the pre-wetted salt stays on the road as opposed to only 5% of the salt if you try to pre-treat roads. So we figure the brine system at about 135,000 is just one of those tools that will help us to better take care of the roads during a snow removal process. It allows us to get ahead of the storm and begin to treat against black ice and the small storms. And when the big storms come, it allows the plows to be much more effective in removing the snow off the roads. Is there any question about the brine system before I move on to the next?
Councilmember Burton has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. So with this, and I actually met with UDOT one time and they explained all this. Apparently UDOT's been using this for some time. Mm-hmm. What kind of a cost savings is this going to provide for us? You mentioned that it reduces how many trucks have to go out, so you're doing one truck instead of 10 trucks or something like that.
It's difficult to put a return on the investment. I mean, we don't know just yet how effective it is. I've had other agencies, UDOT, some other cities down in Utah County have said that it pays for itself in about 5 years in snow removal. Again, this last winter we didn't have a whole ton of snow, and so in an instant like that, it may not have been as highly effective as it was maybe the previous year. It really is a great treatment for black ice, which is hard to put a value on and hard to treat. It's kind of difficult to answer the question.
So this cost, is this an annual cost or is it a one-time cost?
No, it's a one-time cost.
So the brine treatment itself isn't that something we need to buy? What is the brine?
We would use the regular granular salt that we purchase every year for snow removal. It goes into a machine that mixes it with water and creates a super saturation of that salt. It's then put into a truck that sprays it on the road ahead of a snowstorm. So really the green sheet is just for that equipment to be able to mix water and salt.
Okay. So we anticipate maybe like a 5-year payback?
Yes. I've heard UDOT say it takes about 5 or 6 years to pay back.
So let's go with 6 or 7 years maybe. Could we deduct this, divide it by 7 and take 1/7 of that off because we get some of that money back the first year?
I don't see why not. I mean, that's up to the council and budget process, but I mean, it's one of the tools. When you go in to do a construction job, sometimes you have a Phillips screwdriver, sometimes you have a straight head screwdriver. Depends on what the job you're doing, which one works best.
Sometimes use a power screwdriver. Thank you.
Councilmember Cudahy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to respond to Councilmember Burton's comment about the changing in valuation, personally, I wouldn't expect to see any financial payback on it, just because what I saw with my ride-along with I've done a number of ride-alongs with the snowplow drivers, and when the snow hits really hard, they spend a lot of time going up and down the exact same route again and again and again. So if this were something that would help them not have to hit that road so many times, I don't anticipate that we would let them take off early. Rather, I anticipate we would still be going and hitting other streets. So we'd still have the same hours, the same miles. It would just be able to take the service to more people. So I wouldn't anticipate any financial return. I would like to see us spend the same amount and just get the benefits as far as we can. So that's just my own personal thought. Thank you.
No more questions, so keep going.
Okay, the next item that I wanted to talk about was with fleet. Our fleet situation for 20 years has been limited to the number of vehicle maintenance bays that we have in the Public Works building. There's currently only 4 bays available for maintaining vehicles. We asked in a previous year, and we're asking again this year, to add 2 additional fleet mechanics to take care of our ever-increasing fleet. We've looked at the value that would provide and have identified by conservative estimates that we would be able to reduce contractor costs of contracting out some of our small engine repair and some of our heavy equipment repair by doing that in-house, and also generate about $30,000 in revenue from doing our own warranty repairs from Ford, which kind of helps offset some of the costs associated with bringing in additional mechanics. And again, that's a conservative estimate. If we were to go by this past year's numbers, that would we would see additional contractor savings. So some details regarding our fleet organization. We currently have 4 mechanics. We have a number of heavy diesel, small engine repair work, like I said, that we contract out, and we'd be and some of the heavy equipment are fire engines, actually. Just to summarize our fleet size in here, there's been estimates given in the past. These are numbers that we pulled from just this afternoon. We have 280 light vehicles, 165 of those are police, 61 heavy vehicles, which include all of our utility service vehicles, ambulances, fire engines, dump trucks, 87 other drivable equipment like mowers, asphalt rollers, loaders, tractors, and such, street trailers, and then small engine equipment. By maintaining all of these, I mean just routine maintenance of doing those 3 times a year, of going in and doing oil changes and inspections, all that kind of stuff, you can easily occupy 2 full mechanics. You can easily occupy another mechanic just taking care of fire engines. They're extremely complicated pieces of machinery. They're very, very difficult to keep running, unfortunately, because of all of the different moving parts and all of the pumps and motors and everything that's on those. And so our fleet group really, really struggles to stay ahead of all of the equipment that we have in the city. And so, for example, early in the spring, as the parks group starts to ramp up for park maintenance, we get absolutely swamped with maintaining and inspecting mowers, blowers, all of that. And so all of that stuff typically gets contracted out. Likewise, during the wintertime when we do snow removal, we could see as many as 3 or 4 dump trucks or plows go offline that need maintenance. And we just don't have that capacity to be able to get them back on the road really quick. So we struggle in our fleet department to maintain all of the vehicles. We're asking for 2 additional fleet mechanics to assist and try to keep up and be more proactive in taking care of the city's fleet.
Thank you. If you can go back 1 slide, I just had a question on these fleet mechanics. Mm-hmm. So if I'm reading that correctly, we're currently spending $37,000, or no, it's $161,000, $162,000 what we're spending on contractor?
No, I'm sorry, the $162,000 would be the total cost. It would be to hire the mechanics without the offset from cost savings.
Okay, how does having employees offset having a contractor provide? I mean, why would having our own staff do it versus having contractors do it? We contract with ACE because it's probably more expensive for us to do solid waste, so we contract with a contractor. So how do we save money doing it in-house versus a contractor?
The contractor actually is a premium to doing it in-house, and we're beholden to their schedule and their timeline. We estimate that we could save $12,000 in small engine repair and $25,000 in large equipment repair by doing that in-house by not sending out the things that we're too busy to handle. And so we currently budget for different contractors to handle some of those heavy equipment and small engine repairs, and what we do is we would reduce our dependency on those contracts.
Okay, because I would understand having city staff working on fire trucks, because I agree they are complicated pieces of equipment, but okay, I'm still working that one through my head. Thank you.
Go ahead. Any other questions about the fleet? The final is with regards to facilities. Every year, the city typically, because of the unforeseen nature of small repairs that happen in any of the city facilities, we typically create a green sheet of $150,000 that is kind of a fund of sorts to be able to take care of these unforeseen expenses with regards to facility needs. Because it's not really a budgeted expense, it's kind of a weird way to budget for some of these unanticipated expenses. But it's kind of been a tradition just to put it on as a green sheet and treat it as such, and then use it as it's needed. We've got a number of aging facilities in the city. We currently only have 4 maintenance techs and a supervisor and 363,000 total square feet of public facility space. And going through, these are most of the larger facilities that the city owns. And you can go through here, some of the Pioneer Hall facilities building. The Cemetery Sexton building is 30 years old. City Hall is about 25 years old. We're looking at some of these other buildings that are about 15 years old. When we start looking at HVAC equipment, heating and cooling, all of that equipment typically has about a 25-year life. And so as they get toward a little older, they typically break down. And so you might have a need to replace a chiller or fix air conditioning in animal shelter, for example, or all of these other projects. And rather than coming for a budget amendment every single time that something breaks, this green sheet is kind of created as a pool to be able to draw from on some of these small facility repairs. Is there any questions about this particular item?
Councilmember Whitelock.
The facility building is, what building is that?
There's a small building that's located back by the rodeo grounds where the facility groups have some offices and some storage to be able to take care of the government center.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So that's just 150,000 for unanticipated issues. What budget would the anticipated issues fall under? Would that be capital support fund?
Can I give you an example?
Authority?
What was it, a couple of years ago, the attorneys remodeled their offices? All of a sudden in mid-year, they said, we want to remodel our offices down there. Mark Palish wanted to have lighting put all around the building, the light that shines up all around the building. And so those are the unanticipated things that it's difficult to budget for when building safety, for instance, wants to redo all the countertops up there in the front and reorganize and redo. These are just unanticipated things that I was experiencing in the facilities department that all of a sudden somebody decides they want to do something in the city or in a building in the city, and there's no budget for it. What I would do if there was no budget is I would have to just do the work and then in January ask for a budget adjustment from through finance to cover the costs of those things. So yeah, they happen.
So my question though is which fund supports the operations and maintenance of the facilities? Is that the capital support fund that would normally cover
facilities
those
facilities department does have a regular maintenance budget that they have, which takes care of the cleaning, window washing, a lot of other minor things. All the utilities are in there. there are some regular maintenance items, painting an office, for instance, that's always, those things are budgeted for. But when there's a bigger item like remodeling an office, those things, they're never really.
So my question though is which fund has those items? As I'm trying to look through, we don't have a separate fund called facilities. That's why I'm asking, is that capital support? So I can see the 150,000 in context to everything else that's
I'm
out
not sure where it got put, but it always was in a facilities budget that I turned in, so I'm not sure where it is this year. David?
Yeah, facilities is located in the general fund.
There should be a buildings and grounds line, if you find it in there. And the buildings and grounds line takes care of a lot of minor things, painting of offices and a lot of minor repairs and things that happen.
So I'm seeing under the summary, Office of the City Manager, Courts, Administrative Expense, Finance, City Attorney, Community Preservation, HR, Public Works, Parks, Development, Economic Development.
It'd be under Public Works as a division within Public Works. At least it used to be.
It's still there.
Maybe you don't have a budget this year for facilities, I don't know.
No, we do. We budget, like you, as you say, for janitorial services, for the utilities. There's a small budget in there for department supplies, equipment, that kind of stuff. This is for those other things that seem to pop up during the year.
Yeah, buildings and grounds was always the typical maintenance items that would come up. But it's these unforeseen things that we always struggled with that happen.
So in summary, we're asking for the 3 green sheets. We're asking for a brine system, 2 fleet mechanics, and some funds necessary to take care of the small projects around the facility. The fleet mechanics and the brine system, we believe, has a return on that investment, and we believe it'll provide better service to our snow removal and be able to do a better job of servicing our vehicles. The facilities here takes care of, this money is to take care of the aging facilities that are in the city.
Councilmember Jacob has a question.
It's not so much a question, it's just a request for staff. Can we get this presentation, and I assume finances as well, linked to the agenda on the website? Just for transparency's purposes?
I would love that if I'd get them ahead of time. I usually don't see them till you do.
Just a request, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So finance.
Okay, we're on the clock. Go. Finance has one item on the green sheets, and that was for a meter tech person. So we currently have a part-time position for a seasonal worker. The load has gone up as far as like we're experiencing a lot more as far as the registers needing to be replaced and so forth, and then work orders from the system. But so we put in and requested for a full-time person. So if we got this full-time person, we would get rid of that seasonal worker. The difference is about $76,000. We currently have in the budget about $15,000, $16,000 for that seasonal. Any questions?
Seeing none, thank you. So we will now go to item 10A, remarks. Are there any further remarks before we adjourn into a closed meeting? Councilmember Lamb.
Can I just get one clarification? Is the meeting next week on from 1P to 5P, or where are we at with the budget meeting?
August 1st, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay, and has
Be
that
right
been
here.
and has that been publicized yet? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
David, you had a. David, your name is up here. Did you have a?
No, it was a.
Okay. Okay, so we need a motion to go into closed session. Councilmember Anderson?
I'll move to go into closed session for the discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, strategy session to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation, and strategy session to discuss, I should say, or strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. After a 10-minute break.
Councilmember Lamb,
Second.
motion
And adjourn from there.
and Councilmember Lamb seconds. We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob,
Okay.
Councilmember Lamb,
Aye.
Mayor Riding,
Yes?
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
What happened today, guys? The shortest council meeting this year.
Yeah. And this should be short too.